All right, our last paper deals with connectivity again. Everyone knows, I think, in North America, BT system uses cellular backup for communications, and here's an example of how we can enhance that network in other areas as well. Our presenter is David Rothbaum. He's the Global Solution Architect for LTE 4G for railway and metro systems at Ericsson. In previous roles, he was Chief Engineer for GSM-R, the railway network, and Mortel Networks. He holds a Bachelor of Applied Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of Toronto and a Master of Science in Management from Boston University.
Laser and you advance? Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. Let's get started. Today, in railway systems, typically we dedicate a separate radio network for every type of application. So if we take the example of urban rail, we might have a TETRA system, a P25 system for voice, and we'll have a different Wi-Fi network for the train control, another Wi-Fi network, something else. In mainline rail also there's GSM-R, which you might have currently has rail and signaling. There is basically an evolution that's going on right now where TETRA, which is the typical public safety communication system, is being migrated to or evolved to a mission-critical push-to-talk system over LTE. And this is done in the 3GPP Release 13, which covers all the TETRA features today. At the same time, in parallel, the mainline rails in Europe are standardizing a future railway mobile communication system. It's called FRMCS, which is going to be based on 3GPP Release 50. Now, if we take the typical railway communication applications, we have mission-critical push-to-talk, which is a typical application. It's not used, for example, in America or Canada, where they have the open line system. That has disadvantages because we've seen rail collisions. Amtrak 188, the 188 collided because there was too much chatter on the line. So introducing a mission-critical push-to-talk voice would introduce a safer system than you have today. Train control can be introduced as well as an application, and PTC, CBTC, and ETCS, they're all basically radio layer agnostic in the long run. Real-time CCTV, train telemetry, wayside telemetry, and passenger information system. And I'll go into detail in each one of these applications. So as I mentioned earlier, if we take a typical metro, a very advanced metro system, state-of-the-art, it's still using 3 different radio networks. Wi-Fi network for its CBTC, 802.11 AP, and it's evolving to P here. A TETRA network, and the 802.11p solution doesn't provide me with a voice solution. So when the TETRA network becomes obsolete, I don't have really a solution to go to 802.11p. And a different Wi-Fi network for CCTV and PIS. The reason why I need a different Wi-Fi network is I don't really have a good prioritization between this mission-critical application, which is train control, and CCTV, which is not mission-critical. With LTE for rail, which is a standard LTE, I'm not introducing a new flavor of LTE, but the standard 3GPP LTE, I can prioritize all the different rail applications onto one radio access layer. Now, how do I do this? Because I need to do the prioritization. I have mission-critical applications like railway emergency calls, CBTC, that should be prioritized over things like train-side and wayside telemetry, just the sensor traffic. So within 3GPP, I have over the radio layer something that is called QCI, which is the quality index, which assigns a priority. So when it goes through the buffering system, there is a scheduler that schedules that the traffic up here will be scheduled to go over the radio layer before other traffic. So if I take the train control application, whether it's positive train control, communication-based train control for metros, European train control systems for main lines in Europe, 3GPP provides redundant network elements in the architecture, and it provides the prioritization of traffic, as I explained earlier, with low latency. We can get latencies of below 6 milliseconds, even at 350 kilometers per hour. Low packet loss and redundant radio carrier, because in the case of CBTC, for example, the requirement specification specifies no single point of failure. So I need 2 redundant radio networks in order to provide that. In the architecture, it's a flat architecture. If I start off at the train layer, and I indicated all the different railways could use or share that use the Philadelphia area could share the same radio access network. They could share, they don't have to assign different radio access networks. They would share the same redundant radio access networks. It would go through an evolved packet core, a virtualized data management core. This would do the mission critical push to talk, and you would have an interoperability to legacy radio systems. Now, what we could do in this LT architecture is that we can assign a core, a different core for each type of railway system. They would have their unified access network, but they would have perhaps their own mission critical push to talk core server, which would be dedicated for the operations of that particular railroad. In the mission critical push to talk sphere, the architecture on board would start at the railway touch display, which the driver could use to dial and apply the different types of voice functions. We would use a standardized railway ruggedized PC on board, which would hold the mission critical push to talk application. There's an on-board LT modem router, which is railway certified 50155, which aggregates all the different types of traffic, not only the mission critical push to talk, but also the train control, the sensor information, the train management system, the CCTV cameras, all are aggregated here in this router. It goes up through one or a duplicated radio access layer to the core, and for this particular application I'm describing here, there's a dedicated mission critical push to talk server for railway, which applies the different types of group calls, it's railway emergency calls that you need. Right now, I was riding a SEPTA train from the airport to here, and one of the big limitations of the CCTV cameras is they're not connected to the operations center. They're connected to recording on board. So if there is an incident on board, somebody pushes a button, calls 911, the railway operators and security operators are blind to what's going on in the train right now. If I take last December, there was a train, a guy who ran a Christmas market in Berlin, and he wasn't found for about 3 or 4 days. He popped up in Milan, and then he was shot and killed there. But during those intervening days, he was riding trains in Europe, and there was no way to really find him without real-time CCTV passenger surveillance. So LT provides the same capability to focus in on the particular passengers if need be. Train telemetry. So most modern train systems have what's called a train management system on board. And what we can do is provide an LT modem that in real time sends all that sensor traffic to a railway analytics center. And you can determine, oh, I've got this. So what I do is I do condition-based monitoring, let's say on the door motor of that particular door. So I can analyze the profile of that current over hundreds of attempts and see, this door motor is starting to weaken based on the current profile in this railway analytics center. So I can flag it for that depot. I know it's going to fail in a month. I can flag it for the depot. So we can use that same analogy toward all the subsystems on the train using this real-time analysis system. Wayside telemetry. So in the 3GPP, we're able to implement low-powered sensors here in 5G that have battery life of 10 years. So I can institute, let's say we'll take the switch machine. So it's not called point machine here, it's called a switch machine in North America. It has a little motor that goes back and forth, that switches the track. And what if that fails, then the rail line is out of service. Now what they do is they send every month, they send somebody to test that current on that motor. But it's right on the rail, it's very dangerous work. You have to be careful. Now, what we do is we put a low-powered sensor here on this point machine that monitors the current every time it's used. And they send that back to a gateway to the Railway Analysis Center. So I have a condition-based monitoring that I'm introducing towards on the same LTE network that I'm putting all the other traffic. It's at a lower priority, but I'm able to introduce all these sensors into the network right now. Right now I put LoRa here because 5G is not ready. We have a trial right now going on using LoRa until 2018 when we will have the 5G sensors available. If I just, where is LTE used in the railway world today? So Australia right now is, there is an RFP coming out because they already have an allocation to the railway of the 1800 band that they're using it right now for GSMR. So there will be migrating to LTE starting in Perth. China, every new metro, and they introduce a new metro practically every 6 months in China. They're very brisk in introducing new infrastructure. They have allocated this guard band, which is in the 1800 guard band, towards LTE for metros. So that every new metro must use this LTE frequency. In Korea, they are already using band 28, which is in the 700 band, which is the public safety band. So they allow the railways and the metro, both Busan and Seoul Metro, already use LTE here for the operations, and they've introduced a mainline rail, Gwangju line, also in band 28. In Europe, they're still investigating what to use, whether it's the extended GSMR band here, which is adjacent to the current GSMR band, or to share with public safety. So band 28 and band 68 in France, and there's also trials with 2600 in France as well. In North America, this is the band 14 public safety band used or allocated to FirstNet. So I want to make a proposal that railways and metros and subways share FirstNet's bands, and I'll explain that in a moment. Because if we, public safety, FirstNet, which is after 9/11, they discovered that the police and emergency communication bands get overloaded in a big crisis. So the federal government has allocated band 14, which is in the 700 band, towards public safety traffic. Now, the problem is budget. It costs a lot of money, billions of dollars, to put a coast-to-coast public safety network, and in the cities as well. So this public safety network has been slow to take off. But the railways also need this network. You can see all the business case to get this particular spectrum. So if the railways could be sharing this particular public safety network, they could get coverage along the railway lines and the metro tunnels. So the railway lines, for example, public safety, how are they going to, in the subway in Philadelphia, on the Market Street line, or the Broad Street line, or all the regional rail tunnels? It'll be very expensive for public safety to put radios down there in order to get the Philadelphia Police Department coverage. Well, the railways can provide that coverage, and in return, they get to use that spectrum. Okay? So if there's an emergency, and what they do is they share the RAN. So everyone has their own core. So they share the radio in the tunnel, and everything is routed, depending on the type of device you're using, the SIM card in your device, it's routed to a different core. So it could be the railway core is here, and the public safety core is here. And this is a standard architecture. It's called multiple operator core network. So in public safety, they're not going to let you use the frequency unless they get priority. So as I mentioned earlier, we can use this QCIs, that the yellow area is dedicated only for emergency calls. So if there's an emergency, the emergency services have priority over all the other services. Okay, and the railway, if there's no emergency, they get to use all the spectrum as much as they need. Now, I took just an example here of the Philadelphia area. So you've got the tunnel areas on the Market Street line, and regional rail goes through here, and you've got the Broad Street tunnels here, the metro here, and these are the open layers here. So what you do is you use and you get a narrow beam that operates the cell. In 5G, we have something called beam forming, so we can operate a very narrow beam. Here, this is the antenna here, and here's an antenna here. So it doesn't cover the regular area of, and then once the public safety agencies, they can use the same tower investment here and cover all the areas surrounding the rail line. Now, if there is, let's say, an incident here, or let's say a cell capacity can fit 1,000 policemen. Now, let's say you do get 1,000 policemen on your rail line. Well, that means your rail line is stopped because you have a crisis on your rail line, and you really don't need to share it. The police, let them do their work, and then once they're finished, we'll get on our way. And this allows in the tunnel areas for the police also to get coverage for free, because the railways or the metro system, the subway system, is already providing that coverage. Any questions?
Yes. You're introducing some kind of logic in priority management beyond what you just presented before, where signaling data has higher priority, and then you say, hang on, public services, because I make an educated decision, 1,000 policemen means emergency, then I flip the priority.
No, I don't flip the priority. Basically, oh, sorry. I must have did something wrong here. It's okay. Okay, let's just go down. Okay, so what I mentioned earlier is that there's a prioritization. That means that the police force gets exclusive use of these. Now, in order for this to stop working, 1,000 policemen have to be here. Okay, so if there's 1,000 policemen here using these particular, all the emergency prioritization, then of course there's not enough capacity for this to work. It'll be basically deferred. So CBTC will have the wrong type of latency. It won't have the 100 millisecond latency that it needs. It will have whatever, 200 millisecond latency, and then the train will stop and won't be able to continue. But that's because there's 1,000 policemen in the tunnel together with that train. So if there's 1,000 policemen in the tunnel, obviously there is no sense for the train to continue.
Is that proximity based? The reason why I'm asking, because if you go back to your map, the one you just showed, that area. So if I'm in the yellow,
Yeah.
going from left to right,
Yeah.
does it affect my trains going north to south?
No, this will be a different cell. These are different tunnels. So in each type of tunnel, I have the range in a tunnel of LTE would be about 1.5 kilometers, which is like, let's say a mile, okay? So every mile, I'll need to establish a different cell. I drew one big cell here, but basically every mile there's another cell. So here, there's a different cell here, different cell here. Every mile there's another cell.
maybe one comment to the overall talk. I mean, we are currently preparing the qualification for Envisal, for the European Commission on the prioritization in Italy. And I think we can have a long debate what could be the priority vector we need to operate a railway, like a high-speed railway in Germany and France. But this is not the issue. The issue, the real issue in Europe and I think elsewhere, also in the US, is who is paying for the network. If you take the TGV Méditerranée, you have 800 kilometers of high-speed train, and the question is now, who is installing LTE? And it took us 18 years to define GSMR, it took us 15 years to install it, and today it's obsolete. We can just forget GSMR. The sidebands won't rescue us, we don't need the frequencies even. And now the big question is, who is paying the next network? This is the big issue. And I mean, of course, Ericsson can only present technologies or something, but I think you should highlight this point, that in Europe today we have a big discussion or debate. We want to use LTE over public networks, and we don't have a first network in the US. There's not even the idea. And this is the big issue, and it's about a multi-billion-dollar issue, and less the priority.
But if you take the application of GSMR, it covers only voice. And on top of that, I put ETCS, which is train signaling. But on this, I mentioned all those IoT, all those sensors. The business case for that pays for itself. So if you introduce the sensors here,
I don't know which slide you're
back one more, one more, here. If you introduce these sensors here, so every railway is anxious to introduce this, because the business case to develop a radio network just for the sensors, introduce the IoT in order to automate their network, to make it more efficient, to reduce the maintenance costs, this can pay for it by itself. So the other things like train control and the voice is just an added benefit.
But we don't have this debate. I mean, there's not one European major railway like in Germany or in France where we are thinking about radio-controlled remote devices. I mean, our system is working.
But,
reliability of the TGV is close to 100%.
Yeah. So we have 2 trials now with SNCF is very interested in this, and Traffic Verkate is interested in this, and we have a trial in Lithuania for this. So there are railways are getting interested in this. In Hong Kong, MTR, which is a big player in metro markets in the world, is very interested in this.
Yeah.
So the railway companies are getting very interested. And it is there's a use case within FRMCS. So it will be part of the use cases that create the standard for the future railway communication system in Europe.
I know just casually that when PTC was in the standards building basis for the last 25 years or whatever, they started out at 900 for their basic train radios and all, and then somewhere along the line they eventually settled on this 220.
Right.
And has that completely set aside from what you're talking about, or is there somehow that's going to overlap in some way as well?
No, what I'm saying is that if FirstNet allows the railways to use the 700 band for PTC, intercity, let's say, then they could introduce, besides PTC, they can use that 700 for the voice, for train telemetry, for all sorts of functions, instead of using the 220 band or the 900 digital channelized radio, which only has is dedicated, a whole radio network dedicated to only one application. I think that's wasteful. You should have a dedicated radio network that does all the applications.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes our session. Our next session is tomorrow, same place, same.